Montana Territory, October 1879. The first thing Owen McAllister noticed when he stepped into the old ranch house was the silence. Not the peaceful kind either, the kind that felt off, like something was holding its breath. He had not been back to this house since his uncle's funeral 3 days ago. The man had died alone, slumped over in the barn with a half-finished bottle of rye and a rusted Winchester by his side. Owen had inherited the land, a worn-out spread tucked near the Beartooth Mountains, and intended to sell it off fast. He had plans that did not include icy winters and bad memories. But as he walked through the narrow upstairs hall, bootsteps echoing on the dull wooden floor, he heard it, a scuffing sound. Then nothing. Then a soft knock. From above, he turned slowly, eyes narrowing at the ceiling. There was a hatch at the end of the hall, a rope dangling down. Owen pulled it, the attic ladder creaked open. What hit him first was the smell, dust, pitch, and something else. Sweat, fear, someone had been living up there. He climbed up, heart pounding. The attic was dark, lit only by a grimy sliver of daylight from a small window. And there in the corner was her, a woman. Shackled to a beam, ankles bruised, face pale as paper. Her dress was torn, her hair matted, but her eyes were fierce. "Do not come closer," she said, voice hoarse. "I swear I will fight." "I am not here to hurt you," Owen said quietly. "I had no idea anyone was up here." She stared at him, breathing hard. "Then why am I locked in your attic?" "I just inherited this place," he said, raising both hands. "My uncle, he must have." He stopped. His stomach turned. "Hell," she looked like she wanted to believe him. She was trembling, but she did not cry. She just stared at him like she had been holding herself together with pure willpower. "I am going to get those chains off you," he said. She nodded once. He ran downstairs, grabbed a rusted crowbar from the shed and came back, working at the lock until it cracked open with a metallic snap. Her wrists were raw where the shackles had rubbed them. He helped her down the ladder carefully. She stumbled once and he caught her. "I am Owen," he said. "Etta," she whispered. "Etta Jameson." She collapsed in his arms. 2 hours later, she was wrapped in a quilt on the parlor couch, sipping hot broth. He watched her from the chair across, stunned at what he had found. "Who did this to you?" he asked gently. Her hands tightened around the mug. "There were 3 men. They dragged me off the stagecoach outside Red Lodge, said I had a debt to pay, said I was the reason their brother died in Cold Creek." Owen frowned. "That is almost 60 miles from here." "They brought me here last winter," she said. "Your uncle let them. I do not know why." Owen felt sick all over again. "I worked as a nurse," she said. "In Helena. I helped wounded soldiers, settlers too. I bandaged a man once he had shot himself in the foot trying to rob a freight wagon. I did not know what he had done. I just helped. And that is what they blamed you for," she nodded. "His brothers said I should have let him die." Owen had no words. He hated his uncle in that moment, hated the men who had done this. But most of all, he hated the idea that she had been up there alone for nearly a year. "You are safe now," he said. "I swear it." She looked up at him. Her eyes were tired, but something in them softened. "You are the first good man I have seen in a long time." The next morning, Owen rode into the town of Bridger and sent a wire to the sheriff in Red Lodge. Then he bought what he could: bread, meat, fresh blankets, and rode back fast. He did not want to leave her alone for long. She had been through too much already. When he stepped inside, Etta was standing near the hearth holding a broom. She looked startled to see him. "I was not sure you would come back," she said. "I said I would," Owen replied. He moved closer. She set the broom down. Her hands were still shaking a little, but she looked stronger than the day before. He could see the woman she had been before all this, proud, capable, bright. "I am not going anywhere," he said. She looked away, blinking fast. "Etta," he said, softer. "No one is going to hurt you again, not while I am breathing." She met his eyes then. Slowly, she stepped forward. He thought she might cry, but instead she pressed her forehead gently to his chest. He felt her breath catch. "I do not know how to be okay anymore," she murmured. "We will figure it out," he said. "Together." He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. She did not pull away. By the end of the week, Etta had started walking outside again, standing in the sun like she had not seen it in a lifetime. Her smile was still rare, but when it came, it hit him hard. Owen found himself watching her more than he should, how she brushed her hair, how she laughed softly when he told her stories about his childhood. She was smart, sharper than anyone he had met, and when she looked at him, he felt something deep settle in his chest. One morning, as she stitched a tear in his shirt, she asked, "Why have you not left yet?" He shrugged. "I was going to sell the place, but now," she waited. "Now I am thinking I might stay a while." She looked at him for a long time. "I want to be near you, Etta," he said simply. Her eyes flickered. "I am not fixed," she said. "I do not want perfect," he said. "I want you." She blinked hard, then nodded once. "All right." But peace never lasted long out here. 3 days later, Owen was loading firewood when he heard hooves. He looked up. 3 riders were heading down the ridge. He recognized the lead one from the description Etta had given him. The men who had locked her in the attic were coming back. Owen dropped the last log and straightened, eyes fixed on the distant riders. Dust curled under the horses' hooves as they cut across the gully, heading straight for the house. The lead man wore a long canvas coat, collar turned up against the wind, and his hat shaded most of his face, but Owen could see the way he rode. Confident. Entitled. The kind of man who didn't expect to be refused. He stepped onto the porch, rifle already in hand. Etta had been inside boiling potatoes, but now the door swung open behind him and she stepped out quietly, her apron still tied, a kitchen knife in her hand. "You recognize them?" Owen asked without turning. "Yes. The one on the sorrel's name is Clay Morton. He's the oldest." The horses slowed as they reached the edge of the yard. Clay pulled his mount to a halt and scanned the place like he was sizing up a purchase. The other 2 stayed a few paces back, eyes flicking from one window to the next. Clay dismounted with a grunt, then walked forward, gloved hands hanging loose at his sides. He stopped 20 feet from the porch and tipped his head. "Morning," he said. Owen didn't lower the rifle. "State your business." Clay smiled, slow and easy. "Heard my brothers and I left something behind here last year, came to collect it." "She's not a thing," Owen said, Clay's eyes narrowed. "We got a claim." "You don't know what she did." "I don't care. Now that," Clay said, taking another step, "is a problem." Etta stepped up beside Owen, her voice calm. "You want to lie about me, do it somewhere else." Clay's gaze slid to her. "You look better than I expected. I'm not afraid of you anymore." "That's so?" Owen lifted the rifle, aimed square at the man's chest. "You need to leave, now." Clay didn't blink. "You planning to shoot a man in front of a lady, if it keeps her safe, yes." Clay looked past him to Etta again. "You really think this man's gonna save you? He don't even know what you are." Etta answered before Owen could speak. "I'm someone who helped your brother when he was bleeding to death. I didn't ask what he'd done. I treated him anyway. And when he died, you decided that was my fault." She stepped down one stair, voice steady. "I've lived through worse than your threats. I'm not going anywhere." Clay studied her for a long moment. Then he spat in the dirt and turned. "You made your choice." He mounted up, barked something at the others, and the 3 of them rode off the way they came, hooves pounding hard across the dry wash. Owen didn't lower the rifle until they passed out of sight. Inside, Etta set the knife down on the counter, her hands finally starting to shake. Owen placed the rifle against the wall and turned to her. "You didn't have to come outside." "I wasn't going to hide," she said. "Not again," he nodded slowly. "They'll be back. I know." He stepped closer. "If I send you east, maybe to Fort Benton, you could catch a steamer downriver. Be gone before they try again." "I won't run, Owen. You've been through enough. And I'm still standing." They stood there a long while, the scent of boiled potatoes drifting between them, the fire crackling low in the hearth. Outside, the wind picked up and rattled the shutters. Finally, Etta said, "You could leave. You don't owe me anything." He shook his head. "That's not how I was raised. You were raised by a man who kept me chained in his attic." "I wasn't raised by him," Owen said. "I just share his blood." She watched him carefully. "Then why are you still here?" He looked down at her, voice quiet. "Because you are." Later that night she didn't sleep, neither did he. He sat by the hearth cleaning the rifle piece by piece. She sat by the window watching the night for movement. Neither spoke, but something had shifted. The next morning, Owen took the wagon into town again. This time he bought more than food. He came back with lumber, nails, a second rifle, and a coil of barbed wire. When he pulled up to the house, Etta stepped out, wiping flour from her hands. "You planning to build a fort?" "Something like that," he said. "If they're coming back, I want them to know they'll have a hell of a time getting in." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I'll help." They worked side by side all day. She rolled wire across the fence posts while he reinforced the windows with cut boards. He added a second lock to the front door. She fitted a slingshot into her apron pocket and showed him the pile of stones she'd gathered from the creek. Just before dusk, Owen stepped back and looked at the house. "It's not perfect. It's home," she said. He turned toward her. "We'll make it one." She didn't answer right away, then quietly, "I believe you." The first snow came early. It drifted down in silence, thick and heavy as wool, covering the ridgeline and flattening the grass around the barn. Owen stood beneath the lean-to, brushing frost from the mare's withers while Etta hammered slats across the henhouse window. The cold made her cheeks ruddy and her breath came in little clouds. She'd taken to wearing one of his wool shirts beneath her coat, sleeves rolled, collar open at the throat. It looked better on her than it ever had on him. "You always get snow this early?" she asked without looking up. "Not usually. Must be a hard winter coming." She stepped back from the hinge she'd just secured and flexed her fingers. "Then we'll be ready for it." Owen pulled the mare's blanket snug and nodded once. "We will." She glanced over, her expression unreadable. "You ever think about what might have happened if you hadn't come back to the house that day?" He didn't answer right away. The mare shifted her weight, stamping once, and he laid a hand on her flank to settle her. "I think about it more than I'd like," he said finally. Etta leaned her hip against the chicken fence, arms crossed. "I used to count the days by the sound of the crows. There weren't many other noises up there. Did you ever think about ending it?" The words left his mouth before he'd fully meant to speak them. She didn't flinch. "I thought about what it would mean to stop waiting, but not once did I let them win." Owen met her gaze. "You didn't." She nodded, but her eyes drifted toward the tree line where the wind had begun to push snow from the branches in small, silent bursts. That night, they ate in the kitchen instead of the front room. The warmth from the stove filled the space, and the oil lamp threw soft light across the table. Etta peeled apples over a basin while Owen stitched new bindings onto a cracked leather saddlebag. "You ever plan to go back to Helena?" he asked, not looking up. "Not anymore," she said. "I had a room there upstairs from the livery. It's probably been rented out twice over by now. You left anyone behind? No one who'd notice." He set the saddlebag down and wiped his hands on a rag. "You could stay here, Etta, if you wanted." She didn't answer right away. Her knife moved in slow, careful strokes, the curl of apple skin falling into the basin in one unbroken ribbon. "I don't want to be something you feel responsible for," she said. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You're not." She looked up then, her eyes steady. "Then what am I?" Owen didn't speak for a long moment. The wind rattled the window panes and the horses shifted out in the dark, hooves muffled by snow. "You're the first thing that's felt right in a long time," he said quietly. Etta's hands stilled. She set the paring knife down. "I've stopped knowing what to say when someone's kind to me," she said. "Then don't say anything," he said. "Just stay." She looked at him, long and level, then rose and crossed the room. She stood behind him for a moment before placing her hand on his shoulder. He covered it with his own. "Will you sleep tonight?" he asked. "I always hear the snow. I'll stay up. I know." She gave his shoulder a small squeeze and left the room. He listened to her footsteps on the stairs, each one lighter than they'd been a week ago. By morning, the snow had deepened. Owen shoveled a path to the barn while Etta boiled coffee and fed the hens. The quiet between them had shifted closer now, not cautious but calm. They moved through the day with a rhythm neither had spoken aloud but both understood. That afternoon, a rider approached from the south trail. Alone, Owen stepped out onto the porch, rifle hidden just behind the door. The man wore a long coat and carried a messenger's bag slung across his chest. He dismounted slowly and raised a gloved hand. "Sheriff from Red Lodge sent me," he called. "Got something for a McAllister." Owen stepped forward cautiously. "That's me." The rider reached into his coat and produced a folded letter sealed with wax. "Sheriff says the Morton boys were picked up south of Livingston. Cattle theft. Looks like they'll be facing charges." Etta emerged from the doorway, quiet as a shadow. "They say anything about here?" Owen asked. The man shook his head. "Didn't mention it, far as I know." "Sheriff figured you'd want to be told they were off the range." Owen nodded once and took the letter. "Appreciate it." The man swung back into the saddle and tipped his hat. "Stay warm out here." As the rider vanished toward the ridge, Owen unfolded the letter. Etta stepped beside him. "They're not coming back," he said. She looked up at the sky where the clouds had cleared just enough to show a pale blue streak. "Then maybe I can stop looking over my shoulder," she murmured. "You can start looking forward instead." She turned to him. "And what do you see, Owen?" He reached for her hand, roughened by cold and work, and held it between both of his. "Spring," he said. "And after that, whatever comes next." Her fingers tightened around his. "Then I'll stay." The wind had shifted by late December, carrying a stillness that settled over the land like a held breath. The snow had hardened into a crust thick enough to walk across without sinking, and the sun, when it showed itself, hung pale and distant above the horizon. Owen had taken to chopping wood before dawn, stacking it along the north wall where the wind couldn't steal the warmth from it. Etta would watch from the kitchen window, sleeves rolled to the elbows, her hands busy with whatever needed mending or blanching or grinding. They spoke less during those early hours, but it wasn't distance, it was rhythm. That morning, Owen returned from the barn with a strip of rawhide frozen stiff in his hands. He hung it beside the stove to dry, then turned as Etta laid out a map across the kitchen table. "I found this in the drawer by the pantry," she said, smoothing the corners. "It's old, but the trail markings are clear." He stepped closer, scanning the hand-drawn lines and faded ink. "You thinking of going somewhere?" he asked, voice low. Her eyes met his, steady. "I was thinking we might expand the garden come spring. If we clear the southern slope near the creek, I could plant beans and squash. There's a frost line marked here, see it?" He leaned in, nodding slowly. "You've been planning ahead. I've been picturing what it'd be like to grow something that's ours." Owen traced the line she pointed to with his finger. "That soil's rocky, but the runoff to keep it fed." She folded the map carefully and looked up. "Then we'll need to start cutting back that brush once the thaw comes." He stepped back and studied her. "You really mean to stay?" Etta hesitated, then walked to the window and looked out toward the hills. "I used to think staying in one place meant giving up on what I'd lost. But now it feels like choosing something instead." He watched her profile, how the light caught the curve of her cheek as she turned back toward him. "I've never had a say in where I belonged," she continued. "Not until now." He reached for her hand, the movement unhurried. "You do now." She let his hand rest over hers, neither pulling nor pressing, just letting it be. That evening they walked the fence line together, boots crunching over the frozen earth. A hawk drifted low over the treetops, wings stretched wide and dark against the paling sky. Etta paused near the western edge of the pasture where the ground dipped toward the creek. "There's something I've been thinking about," she said, eyes still on the trees. Owen waited. "I want to send a letter to Helena. There was a girl I taught to read during the war, Ruth. She'd write me sometimes after I left, but I never answered. She might still be at the same boarding house." He nodded. "You want to let her know you're alive? I want her to know I didn't vanish. I'll ride it into Bridger next time I go for supplies." She turned toward him then. "You do that without asking what I'd write. I trust you to say what needs saying." She looked down, then back up at him, quieter now. "You've given me more than I ever thought I'd have again." He shifted, rubbing a thumb over her knuckles. "I didn't give you anything. You took it back yourself." She tilted her head slightly. Would it be foolish to say that I'm not afraid anymore? No, he said, just brave. They stood like that as the last of the light faded and the moon rose over the ridge. A coyote howled far off, low and sharp, and neither of them flinched. Later, as they settled by the hearth with mugs of steeped spruce needles and a plate of hoe cake between them, Etta reached for the book she'd been copying recipes into a leather-bound ledger Owen's uncle had once used for cattle tallies. I'm going to need more pages soon, she murmured, flipping to the spot where she'd written down her mother's vinegar pie. We'll find another, Owen said, watching the way her fingers moved over the ink. Or start a second one. She looked up, a smile just touching the corner of her mouth. You think we'll have enough to fill two? We've got time, he said. And your cooking's worth recording. She closed the book gently and leaned back. I never thought I'd live somewhere quiet enough to hear my own thoughts again. Owen reached forward and tucked an errant strand of hair behind her ear, slow and careful. You're not just living here, Etta. You're building this place. She rested her hand on his knee, a quiet motion filled with ease. So are you. The fire popped softly, the scent of pine pitch sweet in the air between them. Outside, the wind had gone still, and for the first time in years, Etta Jameson let herself believe in permanence. The thaw came slow that year. March dragged its heels through lingering frost, and the creek behind the pasture swelled with meltwater that ran quick and cold over stone. Owen watched it from the slope Etta had marked for planting, pacing its edge with a pickaxe and a length of hemp rope. The ground was ready to be worked, but only just. He tapped the soil with his boot and nodded, then looked uphill where Etta sat on a split log, sketching furrows into a folded scrap of paper. Reckon we'll need to dig deep rows, she said without looking up. Water won't pool that way. He rested the pick against his shoulder. You're sure you want to plant all of it this year? If we wait, we'll lose time. Next spring might not be as kind. You've got a mind full of plans, he said, half smiling. She shrugged. I've had years to think. They worked until the light slipped behind the ridgeline, then walked back to the house with dirt under their nails and stiffness in their backs. The house had grown warmer since winter broke its hold, partly from the sun, partly from the new glass panes Owen had installed when he rode back from Bridger in February. Etta had sewn curtains from an old muslin petticoat, and now they moved faintly in the breeze that slipped through the cracked window above the sink. That night, while Etta boiled willow bark to ease the ache in her hands, Owen spread out a folded deed on the table and studied the inked edges. He hadn't told her yet, but he'd ridden to the county office before the last snowfall to settle all the papers. The land was fully his now. The house, the pasture, the long bend of timber running west to the ridge. He looked up as she poured the cooled tonic into a glass jar. There's something I need to show you. She tilted her head. What is it? He turned the deed around and slid it toward her. I added your name. She stared at it, eyes moving across the lines, the calligraphy curling around the words like vines. I didn't ask you to. No, he said. You didn't. She touched a fingertip to the page, then looked at him. It's not a gift I take lightly. It's not a gift at all. It's a life, one we're building together. Etta folded the paper carefully and set it aside. You always know when to say the thing I didn't know I needed to hear. He leaned forward, elbows resting on the table's worn edge. I didn't know I was waiting for you, Etta, but I was. Every day I came back to this land, it felt empty. Until you were here. Her eyes softened, but her voice stayed quiet. Do you still feel like leaving it behind? Not anymore. She reached across and took his hand, palm to palm. Then I guess we're both staying. Spring arrived in earnest 2 weeks later. The snow line retreated to the peaks, and the air grew heavy with new growth. Etta pressed seeds into the furrows they dug together: beans, squash, carrots, and tobacco, the last a gift from a Lakota woman she'd once nursed during a fever outbreak near Miles City. She moved down the rows barefoot, skirt hem tied at her knees, humming under her breath. Owen rebuilt the chicken coop and added a second stall in the barn. Each evening he brushed the horses in silence while Etta read aloud from an almanac she'd bartered from the general store. She'd started a second ledger, this one filled with notes on planting, weather, and moon phases. He teased her about it once, called it her book of dirt, but she just smiled and told him it'd outlast them both. One morning in May, he found her standing on the porch, hands folded over her middle, eyes shining. "I think," she said, "I might be carrying." He stepped forward slowly, searching her face. "You sure?" "Not yet, but I know my body. It feels different." He reached for her waist, held her there, thumb brushing the curve of her side. "You want this?" "I do," she whispered. "With you." He kissed her then, careful and deep, and the world settled into place around them like it had been waiting for that moment all along. They married in June. No preacher, no church, just the two of them beneath the cottonwood tree near the far pasture, with the creek running quick behind them and a handful of wildflowers in Etta's hand. Owen carved 2 rings from a strip of applewood, polished them smooth, and slid hers onto her finger with a promise spoken low and clear. "I'll stay beside you in all seasons until none remain." She returned it without pause. "And I'll walk with you in whatever this land gives us." They sealed it with a kiss, and the wind blew soft through the cottonwood leaves. The summer passed in warmth and rhythm. The garden flourished. Etta's belly curved outward with quiet certainty. Owen built a cradle from pine planks he milled himself, and Etta lined it with wool she carded by hand. They spoke often of the child, whether it would favor her eyes or his hands, whether it would cry like a storm or sleep like stone. In August, Ruth arrived. She came by wagon, a strong-limbed woman with ink-stained fingers and a voice that carried across a field without effort. Etta met her at the gate, arms around her old friend before a word was spoken. Ruth had taken work as a schoolteacher in Billings and had come the last miles on a borrowed rig. She stayed 2 days, long enough to see the garden, the house, the cradle, and to leave behind a stack of readers and a promise to return in the spring with more. After she left, Etta stood on the porch a long while, hands resting over the child within. Owen joined her, silent. "She remembered me," Etta said. Of course she did. They stood together as the sun dipped low, the sky the color of ash and rose. When the baby came under stars in the hush of early October, it was a girl. Etta named her Mercy. Owen held them both close, the child's breath warm against his chest. "She's the shape of everything we never thought we'd have," Etta whispered. He pressed his lips to her forehead. "And everything we'll protect." They never left the land. The seasons turned and their lives turned with them. They planted, harvested, taught Mercy how to braid thistle into rope and how to follow deer track after rain. She grew up between creek and sky, her mother's strength and her father's steadiness in every step. And in that quiet stretch of Montana, where the cottonwoods leaned toward water and the wind carried only what one could bear, Etta and Owen grew old. Not without sorrow, but never without each other. They slept each night beneath a roof they'd mended with their own hands, beside a fire they'd built with shared breath and trust. And they loved for all their days without fear.